Dominic Calderone had built an empire on blood and silence, but nothing prepared him for the ghost standing across a snow-covered Manhattan street on Christmas Eve. The woman he'd divorced 3 years ago, the past he'd buried, and beside her, a small hand clutching hers with innocent trust, a child he'd never seen. In that frozen moment, as holiday lights blurred through falling snow, Dominic saw eyes that mirrored his own. 3 years old, Elena would later tell him, born after he left. The daughter he never knew existed, and suddenly, every deal he'd ever closed meant absolutely nothing. If you're ready to discover whether a man who chose power over love can ever truly come home, stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower smelled like expensive leather and older money. Dominic Calderone sat at the head of the table, his charcoal suit perfectly tailored, his expression carved from granite as three men in cheaper versions of his own clothing nodded their agreement to terms they'd spent 6 hours negotiating. "Then we have an understanding," Dominic said, his voice carrying the particular quiet that made grown men reconsider their life choices. "The waterfront properties transfer by January 15th. My accountants will handle the paperwork. Your people stay north of Canal Street. Mine stays south. We don't overlap, we don't interfere, and we definitely don't have this conversation again." Vincent Marcuso, a barrel-chested man with gray threading through his black hair, extended his hand across the mahogany table. "You drive a hard bargain, Calderone, but fair, always fair." Dominic shook his hand with the measured grip of someone who knew exactly how much pressure to apply. "Fair keeps people alive, Vincent. Greed gets them buried." The meeting dissolved into the practiced rituals of men pretending they were legitimate businessmen rather than criminals in expensive suits. Handshakes, promises that meant something only because breaking them carried consequences measured in blood rather than lawsuits. Dominic had played this role for 15 years, and he'd played it better than anyone else in New York. By the time the elevator doors closed behind the last of them, Dominic stood alone in the empty conference room, looking out at the Manhattan skyline dressed in Christmas lights. December 24th, the city below celebrated with the kind of innocence he barely remembered possessing. His phone buzzed. Marco, his second-in-command and the closest thing Dominic had to a friend. "Clean?" Marco's voice came through the speaker. "Clean," Dominic confirmed. "Marcuso knows better than to play games. We'll have the waterfront locked down by spring." "Good. You heading home?" Dominic glanced around the conference room that had been more home to him than his penthouse apartment for the past 3 years. "Eventually. It's Christmas Eve, Dom. Even we take nights off." "Since when?" "Since never, but I'm trying something new. Wife's threatening to leave me if I miss another holiday. Says she didn't marry me to spend Christmas alone." The words hit harder than Marco intended. Dominic's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Tell Sophia I said Merry Christmas." "You could tell her yourself. Come to dinner. She's making enough food to feed half of Brooklyn." "I'll pass." "Dom, I'll pass, Marco. Give my best to your family." He ended the call before Marco could push further. The silence that followed felt heavier than it should have. Dominic gathered his coat and briefcase, nodded to the security guard stationed by the elevator, and descended into the cold December night. The snow had started falling an hour ago, light flurries that transformed Manhattan into something from a postcard tourists bought and never sent. Dominic pulled his coat tighter and started walking. His driver was parked 2 blocks away, but something about the night made him want to feel the cold, to remember that he could still feel anything at all. His empire had cost him everything, but he'd known the price going in. His father had warned him. His uncle had warned him. Every man who'd walked this path before him had warned him. You can have power, or you can have a life, but you can't have both. Dominic had chosen power, and he'd never once regretted it, until 3 years ago, until Elena. He forced the thought away with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd taught himself not to think about things that couldn't be changed. The past was buried. The marriage was over. Elena had made her choice, and he'd made his. Some doors, once closed, stayed that way. Dominic turned the corner onto Fifth Avenue, where holiday displays transformed storefronts into winter wonderlands designed to separate tourists from their money. A street vendor sold roasted chestnuts to a young couple who laughed like they'd invented happiness. A Salvation Army volunteer rang a bell with mechanical cheer. Christmas carols drifted from somewhere, muffled by falling snow. And then he saw her. Across the street, standing in front of a decorated bookstore window, wearing a navy blue coat he'd bought her 4 years ago. Her dark hair was longer now, falling past her shoulders in waves that caught the light from the street lamps. She was looking at something in the window, her breath fogging in the cold air. Dominic's feet stopped moving. 3 years. 3 years since he'd seen Elena Moore. Elena Calderon, technically, though she'd probably changed it back. 3 years since the morning he'd come home to find her bags packed, her wedding ring on the kitchen counter, and a note that said only, "I can't watch you destroy yourself anymore. Don't follow me." He hadn't followed her. He'd let her go because that's what men like him did. They protected the people they loved by staying the hell away from them. But here she was, standing 50 feet away on Christmas Eve, and Dominic felt something crack in the fortress he'd built around anything resembling emotion. She turned slightly, laughing at something, and that's when Dominic saw the child. Small, maybe 3 feet tall. Wrapped in a pink winter coat with white fur around the hood, the child held Elena's hand with the unselfconscious trust of someone who'd never learned that the world could hurt them. Dominic's breath caught. The little girl looked up at Elena, saying something that made Elena smile and crouch down to the child's level. Even from across the street, even through the falling snow, Dominic could see the tenderness in the way Elena brushed snow from the girl's dark curls. Could see the pure, uncomplicated love in a gesture he'd witnessed 1,000 times directed at him, back when Elena had still believed he could be saved. The girl turned, just for a moment, and Dominic saw her face. His heart stopped. Dark eyes. His eyes. The same sharp intelligence he saw in the mirror every morning, softened by youth, but unmistakable. The same stubborn set to her jaw that his father had always said marked the Calderon bloodline. The same... No. Dominic's mind raced, calculating with the same cold precision he applied to business deals. 3 years since the divorce. The girl looked about 3 years old, maybe a little younger, which meant Elena had been pregnant when she left. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He actually took a step backward, his shoulder hitting a lamppost he didn't remember being behind him. A passing businessman muttered an irritated comment about people blocking the sidewalk, but Dominic didn't hear him. A daughter. He had a daughter, and Elena had never told him. The anger came first, hot and immediate. How could she not tell him? How could she keep something like this from him? 3 years, 3 goddamn years of his daughter's life, gone. First steps he'd never seen, first words he'd never heard, birthdays he'd missed, every single moment stolen. But the anger lasted only seconds before a worse emotion replaced it. Understanding. Elena had left because loving him was killing her, because every day she'd spent waiting for the call that Dominic had been shot, or arrested, or disappeared, had taken another piece of her soul, because she'd begged him to leave the life, to walk away from the empire he'd built, and he'd told her he couldn't, so she'd walked away instead. And if she'd known she was pregnant, if she'd told him, Dominic would have done exactly what he was doing now, standing frozen on a Manhattan sidewalk, staring at a life he'd given up any right to be part of. Elena stood, taking the little girl's hand again. They started walking, heading north, and Dominic realized with sudden panic that they were about to disappear into the Christmas Eve crowds, that he might never find them again, that this moment, this chance, would slip through his fingers like everything else he'd ever tried to hold on to. He started moving before the thought fully formed, crossing the street against the light, ignoring the angry horn from a taxi that swerved to avoid him. His eyes locked on the navy blue coat, on the small pink figure beside it, on the only thing that had mattered in years. Elena, he said it too quietly. They kept walking. Elena! Louder this time. Loud enough that Elena's shoulders stiffened in recognition. Loud enough that she stopped walking and slowly, so slowly, turned around. Her face when she saw him. Dominic would remember it for the rest of his life. Shock, fear, something that might have been residual love buried under 3 years of trying to forget. And beneath it all, a mother's instinct to protect her child from anything dangerous. From him. Dominic, she breathed, and even his name sounded different in her voice now. Careful. guarded. He closed the distance between them, very aware of the little girl watching him with wide, curious eyes. Up close, the resemblance was even more devastating. She had his eyes, but she had Elena's nose, Elena's mouth, Elena's expression of cautious intelligence. "Hi," the little girl said, because children that age didn't understand that some reunions weren't happy ones. "Are you my mommy's friend?" Dominic's throat closed. He looked at Elena, saw the terror in her eyes, the way she'd unconsciously positioned herself slightly in front of the child. Dominic's voice came out rough. He cleared his throat, tried again. "I used to be." "Lily, honey, why don't you look at the window display again?" Elena's voice was steadier than her hands, which had tightened protectively on the child's shoulders. "See if you can count how many teddy bears are in the scene." Okay. Lily, his daughter's name was Lily, skipped back to the bookstore window with the unburdened joy of someone who didn't understand that her world had just shifted on its axis. The moment she was out of earshot, Elena turned back to Dominic. The fear had been replaced by something harder. "What do you want?" "Is she mine?" The question came out blunt, unpolished, nothing like the smooth negotiator who'd closed a multi-million-dollar deal an hour ago. Elena's laugh was bitter. "After 3 years, that's your opening? Not hello, not how have you been, just straight to, is she mine?" Elena's eyes flashed with the same fire that had first attracted him to her, back when he'd been young enough to think he could have both power and love. "Why would you even ask that? You think I'm the kind of person who—" "I can see it, Elena. I can see myself in her face. I can see—" His voice cracked, and he hated himself for it. "How old is she?" Elena looked away. 3. She turned 3 in September. September. We divorced in December, which means you were 2 months pregnant when I left. Yes. The confirmation somehow made it worse. Dominic felt something breaking inside his chest, something he'd thought was already shattered beyond repair. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you made your choice." Elena's voice rose, then dropped when she remembered Lily was nearby. "You chose that life over me, over us, over any chance at something normal and safe and good. Did you really think I was going to bring a baby into that?" "I had a right to know." "You had a right?" Elena's laugh was sharp enough to cut. "You gave up your rights when you told me the empire was more important than our marriage. When you chose power over everything else. When you made it clear that nothing, not me, not a future, not even the possibility of children, was ever going to matter more than your goddamn business." Dominic wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, but every word she said was true, and they both knew it. "I would have helped," he said quietly. "Money, protection, whatever you needed." "I don't want your money, Dominic. I never did. I wanted you, the real you, the man I fell in love with before he disappeared into suits and meetings and deals that always seemed more important than coming home at night." "That's not fair, isn't it?" Elena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking smaller than he remembered. "How many dinners did you miss? How many nights did I fall asleep alone? How many times did I beg you to just walk away, to build something legitimate, to choose a life that didn't require armed guards and encrypted phones? You knew who I was when you married me. I knew who you were. I didn't know who you'd become." The words hung between them like ice in the cold air. Dominic had no response to that because she was right. The man Elena had married still had one foot in the regular world, still believed he could balance both lives. The man standing in front of her now had long since given up that illusion. "Mommy, I counted 17 bears!" Lily came bounding back, her face bright with accomplishment. "But one is really small, so maybe it doesn't count? Do really small bears count?" Elena's entire demeanor changed. The hardness melted into warmth. The defensive posture softened into maternal affection. "Of course they count, baby. Small bears are still bears." Lily seemed satisfied with this logic. She looked up at Dominic with open curiosity. "What's your name?" Dominic crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level. Up close, the resemblance was even more pronounced. She had his coloring, his facial structure, his— "Dominic," he said softly. "My name is Dominic." "That's a long name. Can I call you Dom?" Something in his chest cracked wider. "If you want to." Lily, Elena said, her voice tight with warning. We need to go. Grandma's expecting us for dinner. Lily pouted. But I just met Dom. I know, sweetie, but can Dom come to dinner? The question came out with the simple logic of childhood. If someone was nice, they should be included. Elena's face went pale. No, honey. Dom has his own plans tonight. Dominic stood slowly, keeping his eyes on Elena. Actually, I don't. Dominic, no. Please. The word felt foreign in his mouth. He'd spent 15 years not asking for anything, simply taking what he wanted. But this required permission he hadn't earned and didn't deserve. 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes to talk. Alone. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment Dominic thought he saw something soften in her expression. Then she glanced at Lily, and the walls came back up. Lily, sweetheart, can you do Mommy a favor? See that coffee shop right there? She pointed to a Starbucks 3 doors down. Its windows steamed from the warmth inside. Can you go inside and ask the nice person at the counter for a hot chocolate? Tell them your mommy will be right there to pay. By myself? Lily's eyes went wide. You're a big girl now, and I'll be watching you the whole time. I'll be right behind you, okay? Lily nodded, suddenly serious with the responsibility. She marched toward the Starbucks with careful determination, turning every few steps to make sure Elena was still watching. The moment the coffee shop door closed behind her, Elena turned on Dominic with barely controlled fury. You have 2 minutes. Then I'm walking away and you don't follow. You don't call. You don't show up at my apartment or my mother's house or anywhere else. You had your chance at this life and you threw it away. Lily and I are doing fine without you. Are you? Dominic kept his voice level. Because it looks to me like you're raising a 3-year-old alone in New York City. Do you have any idea how dangerous? Don't you dare, Elena's voice shook. Don't you dare lecture me about danger when you're the most dangerous thing that could ever happen to her. Your world, Dominic, your enemies, your business. Every single day I spent married to you, I was terrified that someone would use me to get to you. Did you really think I wanted that for my daughter? Our daughter. Genetically, maybe. But you don't get to claim her just because you share DNA. Being a father requires more than that. The words cut deeper than any knife Dominic had ever faced. Because she was right. Absolutely, devastatingly right. I know, he said quietly. I know I have no right to ask for anything. But Elena, please, I don't even know what I'm asking for. A chance? To know her? To what, Dominic? To be a weekend father who swoops in with expensive presents and disappears back into your empire? To confuse her about who you are and what you mean to her life? To make her love you and then break her heart the same way you broke mine? I never meant to break your heart, but you did it anyway. That's the thing you never understood. Intent doesn't matter when the result is the same. Through the window, Dominic could see Lily at the counter, pointing at something and chatting animatedly with the barista. His daughter. A whole person who'd been alive for 3 years without him knowing she existed. What's she like? The question came out before he could stop it. Elena's expression flickered. What? Lily, what's she like? Is she happy? Smart? Does she like books? Music? What's her favorite color? Why would you? Because I missed 3 years. 3 years of her life, and I can't get them back. So please, just tell me something, anything. Elena's resistance wavered. He could see the war in her eyes, the part of her that wanted to punish him fighting against the part that had once loved him enough to hope he'd change. Pink, she finally said. Her favorite color is pink. She's obsessed with dinosaurs, which drives my mother crazy because she keeps trying to buy her dolls, and Lily just wants more T-Rexes. She's reading at a first-grade level, even though she won't start school until next year. She's stubborn as hell. She gets that from you. And she asks a million questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? Where do clouds come from? Why can't we have a puppy? That last one is her current crusade. Despite everything, Dominic smiled. Sounds like she takes after her mother. You were always asking questions. Until I finally asked the one that ended our marriage. Are you ever going to choose me over the business? The smile died. Elena, the answer was no, Dominic. It was always no. So I left, and then I found out I was pregnant, and I had a choice to make. Bring a baby into your world or raise her somewhere safe. Somewhere normal. Somewhere she could just be a kid without worrying about bodyguards and enemies and violence. I could have protected you both. That's not the same as being present. That's not the same as being a father. And I wasn't going to raise my daughter to think that love means accepting scraps of attention between business deals. Inside the coffee shop, Lily was heading toward the door, carefully holding a cup of hot chocolate topped with whipped cream. I need to go, Elena said. She's waiting. Wait. Dominic reached out, then stopped himself before touching her. Can I see her again? Not now. Whenever you're ready. I need to know that door isn't completely closed. Elena looked at him for a long moment. He couldn't read her expression, couldn't tell if what he saw was pity or anger or some complicated mixture of both. I don't know, Dominic. I honestly don't know. That's not a no. It's not a yes either. Lily pushed through the coffee shop door, triumph written all over her face. Mommy, I did it. The nice lady said I was very polite. Elena's smile for her daughter was genuine, full of warmth Dominic remembered being on the receiving end of. You were very brave, baby. I'm proud of you. Lily beamed, then looked at Dominic. Are you really not coming to dinner? Grandma makes a lot of food. There's always extra. Dominic crouched down again, meeting those eyes that were so painfully, impossibly, his own. Not tonight, sweetheart, but maybe another time. Promise? He looked up at Elena, who'd gone very still. If your mom says it's okay, then yes, I promise. Lily considered this, then nodded seriously. Okay. Bye, Dom. She threw her arms around his neck in a quick, impulsive hug that lasted maybe 2 seconds but felt like falling off a cliff. Then she pulled back, grabbed Elena's free hand, and started chattering about the decorations in the coffee shop. Elena mouthed one word, "Don't." Then she turned and walked away, and Dominic stood in the middle of a Manhattan sidewalk on Christmas Eve, watching his daughter, disappear into the crowd. His phone buzzed. Marco, probably checking to see if he'd changed his mind about dinner. Dominic ignored it. He stood there until long after Elena and Lily had vanished, until the cold had seeped through his coat and the snow had started to accumulate on his shoulders. Then he started walking. Not toward his car, not toward home. Just walking. Because movement was easier than thinking, and thinking was easier than feeling the enormity of what he'd just lost and found in the same breath. He'd built an empire, controlled territory from Brooklyn to the Bronx, made men twice his age respect and fear him in equal measure. He'd accumulated wealth and power and influence that most people couldn't even imagine. And he'd missed the first 3 years of his daughter's life. Somewhere around midnight, Dominic found himself at the office building he'd left hours ago. The security guard looked surprised to see him back, but knew better than to ask questions. Dominic took the elevator to his private office on the 44th floor and stood at the window looking out at the city that had been both his kingdom and his cage. His reflection stared back at him, a man who'd won everything and lost what mattered. Marco had been wrong earlier. The empire had never taken nights off. It had taken everything, days, nights, weekends, holidays, anniversaries. Every moment that might have been spent building something real instead of something powerful. And now he had a daughter who didn't know him, an ex-wife who'd been right about everything, and a choice he'd thought he'd already made 3 years ago, staring him in the face with the relentless clarity of truth he couldn't negotiate his way out of. Dominic pulled out his phone, scrolled to Marco's number, and made a call that would change everything. Dom, it's past midnight. Everything okay? No, Dominic said quietly. But it's going to be. Clear my schedule for January. All of it. All of it? Dom, we've got the waterfront deal. I know what we have. Clear it anyway. And Marco? I need you to put together a file. Every deal I'm part of, every contract I've signed, every piece of leverage I've accumulated over the last 15 years. Everything. There was a long pause. Dom, what are you planning? Something I should have done 3 years ago. He ended the call before Marco could ask more questions, then turned back to the window and the sleeping city beyond. Somewhere out there, Lily was probably asleep in a warm bed, dreaming whatever 3-year-olds dreamed. Somewhere, Elena was probably lying awake, wondering if she'd made a mistake not telling him to stay away forever. And Dominic stood in the empire he'd built, finally understanding what it had cost him. He had no idea if Elena would give him another chance, had no idea if he deserved one. But for the first time in 15 years, Dominic knew exactly what he wanted. And it wasn't power. The snow kept falling outside, covering Manhattan in white that would turn to gray slush by morning. But tonight, for a few hours at least, everything looked clean and new and possible. Dominic watched the city until dawn, making plans that had nothing to do with territory or profit or control, and everything to do with a little girl who counted teddy bears and loved dinosaurs and had his eyes. The empire could wait. His daughter couldn't. The morning after Christmas, Dominic sat across from Marco in a booth at a diner in Queens that smelled like coffee and decades of bacon grease. The place was nearly empty. Most people were still sleeping off their holiday meals, but Dominic had learned long ago that important conversations happened in unremarkable places. Marco slid a manila folder across the table. "This is everything you asked for. Took me all night to compile it, so I hope you know what you're doing." Dominic opened the folder without touching his coffee. Inside were 15 years of carefully documented deals, contracts, leverage, and secrets. Every piece of power he'd accumulated, every card he held against every player in the New York underworld. His entire empire, distilled into 200 pages. "I need you to understand something," Dominic said, not looking up from the documents. "What I'm about to do is going to seem insane. You're going to try to talk me out of it. Don't." Marco leaned back, studying him with the sharp eyes of someone who'd known Dominic since they were teenagers running numbers in Brooklyn. "This is about the woman, isn't it? The one you saw last night." "Elena." "Your ex-wife, Elena? The one who left you 3 years ago?" "She had my daughter with her, Marco. A little girl, 3 years old." Dominic finally looked up. "Elena was pregnant when she left and she never told me." Marco's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to something that looked like sympathy. "Jesus, Dom. I have a daughter. Her name is Lily. She likes dinosaurs and asks a million questions, and she has my eyes." Dominic's voice was steady, but his hands weren't. "And I've missed every single day of her life because I was too busy building this." He gestured at the folder. "So what are you planning to do?" "Get out!" The words hung in the air between them. Marco stared at him like he'd started speaking a foreign language. "Get out," Marco repeated slowly. "You mean take a vacation? Step back for a while?" "I mean out, Marco. Completely. I'm going to use every piece of leverage in this folder to negotiate my exit. Clean. Permanent. No ties, no debts, no looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life." "That's not how this works, and you know it. Nobody just walks away from what you've built. There's too much money involved. Too many people who depend on—" "I don't care." "You don't care?" Marco's voice rose slightly. "Dom, you've spent 15 years building this operation. You control half of Manhattan's, and what do I have to show for it?" Dominic cut him off. "Money I don't spend? Power I can't use for anything that matters? A penthouse apartment I sleep in 4 hours a night? I had a wife who loved me, and I drove her away. I have a daughter who doesn't know I exist. Tell me, Marco, what exactly was worth that trade?" Marco had no answer. He picked up his coffee, set it down without drinking, and shook his head. "This is going to be complicated, dangerous. The people you're involved with don't like complications." "I know. That's why I need you to set up a meeting, all of them. Everyone who has a stake in my operations. I want them in one room, and I want it done quietly." "When?" "Today." "Today?" "Dom, it's December 26th. Half these guys are still—" "Today, Marco. Tell them it's urgent. Tell them it's about the waterfront deal. Tell them whatever you need to, but get them there." Marco studied him for a long moment. "You're really doing this?" "I'm really doing this." "What if they say no? What if they decide you know too much, that letting you walk away is too risky?" Dominic smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then I remind them exactly how much I know, and how many insurance policies I have in place to make sure that information goes public if anything happens to me. They'll let me walk, Marco. Because the alternative is mutually assured destruction, and none of them want that." Marco pulled out his phone, already scrolling through contacts. "You're either the bravest man I know, or the stupidest. Probably both." While Marco made calls, Dominic's mind drifted back to the night before, to Lily's impulsive hug, So brief he'd barely had time to register it before she pulled away. To Elena's eyes, full of pain and wariness, and the ghost of something that might have been hope. His phone buzzed, an unknown number. Dominic answered it carefully. Mr. Calderon? This is Sarah Chen. I'm Elena Moore's attorney. Dominic's stomach dropped. Her attorney. Yes. Miss Moore contacted me this morning regarding a matter of some urgency. She's asked me to facilitate a meeting between the two of you to discuss certain arrangements regarding your daughter. She told you. Ms. Moore has been my client for 2 years. She's informed me of the situation, yes. I'm calling to schedule a time for you to meet with both of us to discuss paternity testing, potential custody arrangements, and child support. The clinical language made something in Dominic's chest tighten. When? Would tomorrow work for you? My office, 2 p.m.? I'll be there. Good. I should inform you that Miss Moore is primarily concerned with ensuring Lily's safety and well-being. Any arrangement we come to will prioritize the child's best interests above all else. As it should be, Dominic said quietly. There was a pause on the other end. Sarah Chen had probably expected him to argue, to lawyer up, to turn this into a battle. I'll send you the address. Please come alone. The call ended. Across from him, Marco was still on the phone, his voice low and urgent, as he called in favors and made promises. Dominic watched the morning light filter through the diner's grimy windows and thought about the irony of it all. He'd spent 15 years building an empire on the principle that power was the only thing that mattered. That loyalty came from fear and respect in equal measure, that showing weakness was the fastest way to get destroyed. And now he was about to walk into a room full of dangerous men and tell them he was out. Not because he'd been beaten or bought or broken, but because a 3-year-old girl who liked dinosaurs mattered more than everything he'd built. Marco ended his last call. It's done. 8 o'clock tonight, the usual place. Everyone's coming, but they're not happy about the short notice. They'll be less happy when they hear what I have to say. Dom, are you sure about this? Once you start this conversation, there's no taking it back. Dominic thought about Lily's eyes, about the 3 years he'd already lost, about Elena's question that had ended their marriage. Are you ever going to choose me over the business? 3 years ago, the answer had been no. But that was before he knew what no would cost him. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The meeting location was a warehouse in Red Hook that Dominic owned through 3 layers of shell companies. By the time he arrived at 7:30, Marco had already set up. Chairs arranged in a rough circle, coffee that nobody would drink, and enough security outside to make sure nobody did anything stupid. The men arrived one by one. Vincent Marcuso, who'd shaken Dominic's hand less than 48 hours ago. Anthony Russo, who controlled the docks. Michael Chen, whose import operations moved everything from electronics to pharmaceuticals. Tommy DeLuca, the old-timer who'd been in the business since before Dominic was born. And half a dozen others, each representing their own piece of the New York underworld. By 8 o'clock, they were all seated, looking at Dominic with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. This better be good, Calderon, Vincent said. I had to leave Christmas dinner with my family for this. Dominic stood at the center of the circle, the folder Marco had given him in his hands. It won't take long. I called you all here because I owe you honesty about something that affects all of our operations. The waterfront deal? Anthony leaned forward. Did Marcuso try to renegotiate? No, the waterfront deal is solid. This is about me. The room went quiet. Dominic could feel the shift in atmosphere, the way predators tensed when they sensed vulnerability. I'm out, Dominic said simply. Effective immediately. I'm divesting from every operation, every partnership, every deal. I'm walking away clean, and I'm here to negotiate the terms of that exit. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Tommy DeLuca started laughing, a dry, wheezing sound that had no humor in it. You're joking, Tommy said. Tell me you're joking. I'm not joking. Nobody just walks away from this, Vincent said, his voice dangerous. You know too much. You're involved in too much. You think we're just going to shake hands and wish you well? I think you're going to listen to my proposal, evaluate your options, and realize that letting me go is in everyone's best interest. Michael Chen's expression was unreadable. And why would we agree to that? Dominic opened the folder. Because I've spent the last 15 years being very careful. Every deal I've made, every operation I've been part of, every piece of information that could hurt you, I've documented it. Names, dates, transactions, everything. And I've made arrangements for all of that information to be delivered to federal prosecutors if anything happens to me. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. You're threatening us? Anthony's hand moved toward his jacket. I'm protecting myself, Dominic corrected. And I'm offering you a deal. I walk away clean. In exchange, everything I know stays buried. You get to continue your operations without worrying about what I might say or do. Nobody gets hurt, nobody goes to prison, and we all move on with our lives. And if we say no? Vincent's voice was quiet, which made it more dangerous. Then we all lose. You lose because the information goes public. I lose because I'm dead. There are no winners in that scenario, which is why you're going to say yes. Tommy DeLuca shook his head slowly. What could possibly be worth throwing away everything you've built? You've got power, money, respect. You're going to walk away from that for what? My daughter. The words fell into the silence like stones into water. Dominic saw comprehension dawn on several faces. You have a kid? Vincent asked. I didn't know until 2 days ago. She's 3 years old, and I've already missed enough of her life. Dominic's voice was steady. So yes, I'm walking away. The only question is whether we do this peacefully or whether we all burn together. Marco stepped forward with a stack of papers. These are the terms. Dominic transfers all his holdings to the rest of you, divided proportionally based on current partnerships. He signs non-compete agreements, relocates out of state, and maintains zero contact with any of you or your operations. In exchange, you sign agreements acknowledging the transfer of assets and agreeing not to pursue any action against him. And the insurance policy? Michael asked. The information? Stays exactly where it is, Dominic said. As long as I'm alive and my family is safe, it never sees the light of day. The moment something happens to me or mine, it all goes public, automatic, no exceptions. The men exchanged glances. Dominic could see them calculating, weighing the risks and benefits, trying to find an angle that gave them leverage. Vincent spoke first. How do we know you won't use that information anyway? How do we know this isn't just the first step in some play we don't see yet? Because I'm asking you to let me go. If I wanted to hurt you, I'd have already done it. I don't want your territory or your money or your operations. I just want out. Nobody just wants out, Tommy insisted. I do, because I finally figured out what I should have known 3 years ago. There's nothing in this world worth losing your family over. Not money, not power, not any of it. Anthony laughed bitterly. That's rich coming from you. How many times did you tell us business came first? How many deals did you close while the rest of us were having dinner with our families? I was wrong, Dominic said simply, and I'm not making that mistake again. The discussion went on for another hour. Questions about the specifics of the transfer, demands for additional assurances, threats that Dominic met with calm reminders of exactly how much he knew about each of their operations. Marco handled the legal details while Dominic stood in the center of the circle, fielding challenges and holding his ground. Finally, as the clock approached 10, Vincent stood. I want to talk to the others, alone. Dominic nodded and left the warehouse with Marco. Outside, the night was cold and clear, the kind of winter evening where your breath fogged and the stars were visible despite the city lights. You think they'll go for it? Marco asked. They don't have a choice. The alternative is too risky. And after? What's your plan? Dominic looked out at the New York skyline, the city that had been both his kingdom and his prison. Leave. Start over somewhere Elena feels safe raising Lily. Get a legitimate job, live a normal life. Be the kind of father my daughter deserves. You make it sound easy. It won't be, but it'll be worth it. 20 minutes later, they were called back inside. The men had rearranged themselves, no longer sitting in a circle, but standing in a loose group that felt less like a meeting and more like a tribunal. Vincent spoke for all of them. We've discussed your proposal. We have conditions. Name them. You leave New York, not just Manhattan, the entire state. You don't come back, not even to visit. You want to see the city again. You call first and get permission. Dominic nodded. Agreed. You sign over everything. properties, businesses, accounts. We'll handle the transfers through attorneys, but it all goes to us. Fine. And if we ever find out you've been talking to the feds, to journalists, to anyone about our operations, the deal is void. We don't care about your insurance policy at that point. We'll take our chances. I won't talk. That's the point of the agreement. Vincent studied him for a long moment. Why should we trust you? Because I'm giving you everything I have. Because I'm walking away with nothing but my life and a chance to know my daughter. That's not the behavior of someone planning to double-cross you. That's the behavior of someone who's finally figured out what matters. More silence. Then Tommy DeLuca, the oldest man in the room, stepped forward. I've known you since you were 22 years old, Dominic. I watched you build this empire from nothing, and I'm telling you right now, you're making a mistake. You walk away from this life and you'll regret it. The regular world doesn't work for people like us. We're not made for normal. Maybe you're right, Dominic said, but I'd rather try and fail than never try at all. Tommy shook his head sadly, like a father disappointed in his son. Then he extended his hand. Good luck, kid. You're going to need it. Dominic shook his hand, then each of the others in turn. The agreements were signed right there, witnessed by Marco and two of Vincent's attorneys who'd been waiting outside. By midnight, it was done. 15 years of building an empire dissolved in a few hours of negotiation. As the warehouse emptied, Marco pulled Dominic aside. What about me? What am I supposed to do? You take my place. Vincent and the others will need someone they trust to manage the transitions. You've earned it. That's not what I meant. I meant, you're my friend, Dom. What am I supposed to do without you around? Dominic gripped his shoulder. You're going to run this operation better than I did. You're going to remember to go home for dinner. You're going to tell Sophia you love her more often. And when you have kids, you're going to be there for every single moment. Learn from my mistakes, Marco. Don't make them yourself. Marco's eyes were suspiciously bright. You're really doing this. I really am. They embraced briefly, the kind of hug men who've been through war together share when they know it's the last time. Then Dominic walked out of the warehouse and into his future. The next afternoon, Dominic sat in Sarah Chen's office, a place that smelled like leather and old books and the particular kind of tension that came with difficult conversations. Elena sat across from him, wearing a gray sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept well. Sarah sat between them, a legal pad and pen at the ready. Thank you both for coming. I know this is difficult, but we need to establish some ground rules moving forward. Before we start, Dominic said, I want Elena to know something. I signed papers last night. I'm out of the business. Completely. I've divested from everything, transferred all my assets, and signed agreements never to return to New York. Elena's eyes widened. You what? I'm leaving. The life, the city, all of it. I'm starting over somewhere clean. Sarah looked between them, sensing this wasn't part of the script she'd prepared. Mr. Calderon, while that's commendable, we still need to address the immediate concerns regarding, I know, paternity, custody, support. I'll take whatever test you want. I'll agree to whatever arrangement Elena thinks is best. I'll pay whatever support is fair. The only thing I'm asking for is a chance to be part of Lily's life. Elena's hands were shaking slightly. You're serious. You're actually walking away from everything. I already have. It's done. Why? Because you were right. 3 years ago, when you asked me to choose, you were right. The business wasn't worth losing you. It wasn't worth losing the chance to be Lily's father. I was just too stubborn and stupid to see it until I saw her face. Sarah cleared her throat. Perhaps we should focus on the practical matters. Miss Moore, your primary concern has been Lily's safety. If Mr. Calderon is no longer involved in his previous activities, does that change your position? Elena stared at Dominic like she was trying to see inside his head. How do I know this isn't temporary? How do I know you won't get pulled back in? That world doesn't just let people go, Dominic. It did, because I had enough leverage to make them. And because I made it clear that nothing, not money, not power, not threats, is going to keep me from my daughter. Where will you go? Wherever you want. Wherever you think is best for Lily. If you want to stay here, I'll figure something out that respects your boundaries. If you want to leave New York, I'll come with you. If you want me on the other side of the country, I'll go. As long as I can see her, know her, be part of her life, I'll do whatever you ask. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. You'd really do that? Give up everything for a child you just met? She's not just a child. She's my daughter. And I've already given up everything. The only question is whether I get anything back. Sarah looked at Elena. More, I need to know how you want to proceed. We can do this formally. Court orders, scheduled visitation, legal documentation. Or we can try something more flexible, if you're comfortable with that. Elena was quiet for a long time. Dominic watched emotions play across her face. Doubt, fear, hope, anger, something that might have been the beginning of forgiveness. I need time, she finally said. I need to think about this. About what's best for Lily. Take all the time you need, Dominic said. But I'm not saying no. I'm saying I need to see that this is real, that you've really changed, that you're not going to disappear the first time things get hard. How do I prove that? Elena met his eyes. You show up consistently. You do what you say you're going to do. You put Lily first, not sometimes, but every single time. And maybe, if you can do that long enough, I'll start to believe it. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even really hope. But it was a door that wasn't completely closed, and that was more than Dominic had any right to expect. I can do that, he said quietly. Sarah made notes, her pen scratching across the legal pad. I suggest we start with supervised visits, short ones, in public places. Miss Moore present at all times. We can revisit the arrangement in a few months based on how things progress. That works, Elena said. When can I see her? Dominic asked. Elena took a breath. Saturday, there's a park near my apartment. Lily likes to feed the ducks. We're usually there around 10 in the morning. I'll be there. Dominic. Elena's voice stopped him as he started to stand. If you hurt her, if you make promises you can't keep, if you disappoint her, if you make her love you and then leave, I will make sure you never see her again. Do you understand? I understand, and I won't. I promise you, Elena, I won't. He left Sarah Chen's office with nothing but a chance and a promise. The empire was gone. The money was gone. The power was gone. All he had left was the hope that he could become the kind of man his daughter deserved to call her father. It was more than enough. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of brittle cold that made New York feel both beautiful and unforgiving. Dominic stood outside the park entrance at 9:45, 15 minutes early, watching his breath fog in the air and trying to remember the last time he'd been nervous about anything. He'd faced down armed rivals, negotiated deals worth millions with men who'd kill him for showing weakness, walked into rooms knowing he might not walk out. But standing here, waiting to see his daughter for the second time in his life, his hands were shaking. He'd spent the past 3 days in a strange kind of limbo. The penthouse apartment felt like someone else's home. The suits in his closet belonged to a person he used to be. He'd gone through the motions of transferring assets, signing documents, watching his empire dissolve into numbers on spreadsheets that would be divided among men who'd already stopped returning his calls. Marco had texted once, "You doing okay?" Dominic had replied, "Getting there." Now he stood in jeans and a heavy jacket he'd bought specifically because it looked nothing like something Dominic Calderone would wear, and watched the park gates for a navy blue coat and a small figure in pink. They appeared at exactly 10 o'clock. Elena saw him immediately. He'd positioned himself where she couldn't miss him, didn't want to seem like he was hiding or lurking. Lily was chattering about something, animated and bright, completely unaware that the man standing by the entrance had spent 3 days thinking about nothing but this moment. Elena's grip on Lily's hand tightened slightly as they approached. Dominic could see the wariness in her eyes, the protective instinct that said she still wasn't sure this was a good idea. "Hi," Dominic said, keeping his voice casual. "Hi." Elena's response was careful. Then to Lily, "Remember Dom? From the other night?" Lily looked up at him with those devastating eyes that were so much like his own. "The man with the long name." Despite everything, Dominic smiled. "That's me." "How are you, Lily?" "Good. We're going to feed the ducks." "Do you want to feed the ducks with us?" Dominic looked at Elena, asking permission without words. She hesitated, then nodded slightly. "I'd love to feed the ducks," Dominic said. They walked into the park together, an awkward triangle where Lily skipped between them, oblivious to the tension radiating from the adults on either side. The pond was small, surrounded by bare trees and benches where elderly couples sat bundled against the cold. A handful of ducks floated near the edge, clearly accustomed to weekend visitors bearing bread. Elena pulled a bag of duck feed from her pocket. Proper duck feed, not bread, because of course Elena would research the right way to do this. She handed some to Lily, who immediately ran to the edge of the pond and started throwing it with more enthusiasm than accuracy. "Careful, baby," Elena called. "Not too close to the edge." Dominic stood beside Elena, both of them watching Lily's joy at such a simple thing. The silence between them was heavy with 3 years of unspoken words. "She doesn't know who I am," Dominic said quietly. "Does she?" "No. I told her you were an old friend. I didn't want to confuse her until I knew this was real." "It's real, Elena. 3 days ago, you were still running half of New York's criminal operations. Forgive me if I need more than 72 hours to believe you've completely changed your life." "What would convince you?" Elena watched Lily try to coax a particularly stubborn duck closer to shore. "Time, consistency, showing up when you say you will. Not just for Lily, but for yourself. Building something legitimate, proving that you can exist in the world without the power and the danger and the control." "I can do that." "Can you?" Elena finally looked at him. "Because I've been thinking about this constantly since that meeting with Sarah, and I keep asking myself, who are you without the Empire? Do you even know? You've been Dominic Calderone, Mafia boss, for so long that I'm not sure there's anything underneath that anymore." The words stung because they touched on something Dominic had been avoiding thinking about. Who was he, if he wasn't the man who controlled territory and commanded respect through fear? What did he even like to do? What mattered to him beyond power and deals and maintaining his position? He had no idea. "Then I'll figure it out," he said. "People change careers all the time. People start over. I'll learn who I am without all of that." "And if you don't like what you find? If it turns out that normal life is too boring, too small, too ordinary for you? What happens to Lily then? To the relationship you're asking me to let you build with her?" "That won't happen. You can't know that." "You're right. I can't. But I can promise you that I'll try, and that no matter how hard it gets, I won't walk away from her, from either of you." Elena's expression was unreadable. Before she could respond, Lily came running back, her small face flushed with cold and excitement. "Mommy, Dom, did you see? The duck with the green head ate right from my hand." "That's a drake," Dominic said before he could stop himself. "A male duck. The females are brown." Lily's eyes went wide. "How do you know that?" Dominic searched his memory and found something he'd forgotten he had. "My father used to take me to a park like this when I was about your age. He taught me about birds. I haven't thought about that in years." "What else did he teach you?" Lily asked with the unselfconscious curiosity of childhood. Dominic crouched down to her level. "He taught me that ducks mate for life. When they find their partner, they stay together. And he taught me that the males are protective. They'll put themselves between their family and anything dangerous." "Like a superhero?" "Exactly like a superhero." Lily seemed satisfied with this answer and ran back to the ducks with renewed purpose. Elena was staring at Dominic with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I didn't know your father took you to parks," she said softly. "He died when I was 8, before I got old enough to ruin the memories by becoming too much like him." Dominic stood, watching Lily. "He wanted me to be a doctor. Can you imagine? He had this whole plan. Good schools, college, medical school, a legitimate life, safe, respectable. What happened? He died, and my uncle stepped in. And my uncle had different plans." Dominic shoved his hands in his pockets. "I've spent 25 years telling myself my father would have understood the choices I made, that he would have been proud of the power I built, the respect I commanded. But standing here watching Lily, I think he would have been ashamed." Elena was quiet for a long moment. "You've never talked about your father before, not in all the time we were married." "I didn't let myself think about him. It was easier to become what my uncle wanted me to be if I didn't remember what my father hoped I'd become." They stood in silence, watching Lily laugh at the ducks fighting over the food she threw. The moment felt both ordinary and profound. Two parents watching their child, pretending for a few minutes that they were a normal family doing normal things. She asks about her father sometimes, Elena said quietly. Not often, but sometimes. Usually when her friends at daycare talk about their dads. She asked me last week why she doesn't have one. Dominic's chest tightened. What did you tell her? That some families look different, that she has me and her grandmother and that's enough. But I could see in her eyes that she didn't quite believe me, that she felt like something was missing. I want to be that something, Elena. I know I don't deserve it. I know I have no right to ask, but I want to be her father, really be her father, not just some guy who shows up occasionally with presents and apologies. Then prove it. Elena turned to face him fully. Show me you can build a real life, get a real job, find a real place to live. Do the boring, ordinary, unglamorous work of being a regular person. And if you can do that, if you can show me that Dominic Calderon can exist without the empire, then we'll talk about telling Lily who you really are. How long? As long as it takes. A month. 3 months. 6. However long it takes for me to believe you won't disappear. It wasn't the answer Dominic wanted, but it was more than he'd feared. Okay, what do I need to do? Start by showing up next Saturday. Same time, same place. Then the Saturday after that. And the one after that. Be consistent. Be reliable. Be the kind of person a child can depend on. I can do that. And Dominic? Elena's voice was softer now. Find something you care about besides us. A job, a hobby, a purpose. Because you can't make Lily your entire reason for existing. That's too much pressure to put on a 3-year-old. You need to build a life that's worth living even on the days when you don't see her. The observation was so insightful, so quintessentially Elena, that Dominic felt the ghost of what he'd lost when she left him. She'd always seen through him, always known what he needed before he knew it himself. That's what had made losing her so devastating. I'll figure it out, he promised. Lily came running back, breathless and happy. Can Dom come to lunch with us? Please, Mommy? Please? Elena hesitated, and Dominic saw the war in her eyes. The part of her that wanted to protect Lily from potential disappointment fighting against the part that wanted to believe people could change. Not today, sweetheart, Elena said gently. Dom has other plans, but maybe another time. Lily's face fell, but she rallied quickly with the resilience of childhood. Okay, bye, Dom. See you next time. She threw her arms around his legs in an impulsive hug that lasted maybe 3 seconds, but left Dominic feeling like he'd been hit by a truck. Then she grabbed Elena's hand and started pulling her toward the park exit, already chattering about what she wanted for lunch. Elena looked back once, and in that glance, Dominic saw something that might have been hope. Then they were gone, and he was alone in the park with the ducks and the cold and the overwhelming sense that he'd been given a chance he absolutely could not waste. The next week became a crash course in what normal people did with their time. Dominic rented a small apartment in Queens. Nothing like the penthouse, just a 1-bedroom with basic furniture and none of the trappings of wealth he'd spent 15 years accumulating. He opened a regular bank account, separate from the offshore holdings and shell companies. He bought groceries and cooked his own meals and took out his own trash. And he looked for work. You're overqualified for everything, the employment counselor told him on Wednesday afternoon. The woman, Linda, was in her 50s with kind eyes and the patience of someone who'd heard every hard luck story New York had to offer. Your resume says you ran a real estate investment firm. That's management-level experience. But you're applying for entry-level positions? I want to start over, Dominic explained. Build something from the ground up. Learn a new industry. Linda studied him over her reading glasses. Most people don't voluntarily take that big a step backward. What happened? Scandal? Bankruptcy? Something like that. I made choices I'm not proud of. Now I'm trying to make better ones. She seemed to accept this at face value. What interests you? What kind of work would make you want to get up in the morning? Dominic had no answer. He'd spent 15 years doing work that required no passion beyond the desire for power. What did he care about? What made him feel something beyond the cold calculation of risk and reward? I honestly don't know, he admitted. Linda pulled out a form. Then let's figure it out. What were you good at, besides management and real estate? Dominic thought back to his conversation with Lily about ducks, about his father teaching him about birds and nature and the small wonders of the world that existed beyond power struggles and territory disputes. My father wanted me to be a doctor, he said slowly. I was good at science, biology. I liked understanding how things worked, how systems connected to each other. Medical school's a long road if you're starting from scratch, Linda said. But there are other options in healthcare. Medical technician, phlebotomy, even working in a clinic doing intake and patient coordination. Would something like that interest you? The idea of helping people instead of manipulating them felt foreign and appealing in equal measure. Maybe. Yeah, actually, maybe it would. Linda made notes. I can connect you with some training programs. Won't be glamorous, and the pay is nothing compared to what you're used to, but it's honest work, good work, the kind of thing you can be proud of. That's exactly what I need. By Friday, Dominic had enrolled in a certification program for emergency medical technicians. The classes started in 2 weeks and would run for 3 months. The pay afterward would barely cover rent and groceries. But when he told Elena about it on Saturday at the park, something in her expression shifted. An EMT? She asked, watching Lily chase pigeons near the pond. I know it sounds crazy, but I've spent 15 years hurting people, directly or indirectly. Maybe it's time I spent some time helping them instead. That's not crazy at all. Elena's voice was soft. That's really good, Dominic. They'd fallen into a routine over the past 2 Saturdays. They'd meet at the park, let Lily feed the ducks and play, and talk while keeping their daughter in sight. Careful conversations where Dominic shared pieces of his new life and Elena slowly, incrementally, lowered her guard. How's the apartment? She asked. Small, quiet. Nothing like the penthouse. I kind of like it. And you're really okay? Financially, I mean. Sarah mentioned you gave up almost everything in the exit agreements. I kept enough to get by, pay for the training, cover rent for a year or so while I find my footing. I don't need much. Elena laughed quietly. The Dominic I married would never have said something like that. You used to talk about money like it was oxygen, like you couldn't live without accumulating more of it. The Dominic you married was an idiot who didn't know what actually mattered. He wasn't all bad, Elena said, and there was something in her voice that made Dominic look at her sharply. He was charming and intense, and he made me feel like I was the only person in the world when he looked at me. I didn't fall in love with a monster, Dominic. I fell in love with a man who had the capacity to be amazing if he could just step out of his own way. Do you think that man is still in there somewhere? I think I'm starting to see signs of him again. Before Dominic could respond, Lily came running over, her face bright with discovery. Mommy, Dom, there's a dog over there, and the owner says we can pet him. Elena smiled. What kind of dog? A big fluffy one, come on. She grabbed both their hands, one small hand in each of theirs, and pulled them across the park toward where a golden retriever was being fawned over by a small crowd of children. The moment was so ordinary, so perfectly normal, that Dominic felt something crack in his chest. This was what he'd given up. This simple joy of walking hand in hand with his daughter towards something as mundane as petting a dog. This was what Elena had been trying to tell him 3 years ago when she begged him to leave the life. The dog's owner, an elderly man with kind eyes, let Lily pet the retriever while explaining that his name was Buddy, and he was very gentle with children. Lily was enchanted, running her small hands through the dog's golden fur and giggling when Buddy licked her face. Can we get a dog, Mommy? Please? I'll take care of it and walk it and everything. Elena laughed. We've talked about this, baby. Our apartment doesn't allow pets. What about when we move? When we get a house with a yard? Can we get a dog then? Maybe. We'll see. Lily seemed satisfied with this non-answer and went back to loving on Buddy. Dominic stood beside Elena, and for a moment they were just two parents watching their child be happy. She's persistent, Dominic observed. The dog campaign has been going on for a while. Months. She brings it up at least once a week. I keep telling her maybe someday when we have more space. Elena paused. I've been thinking about leaving New York, actually. The city is expensive, and my mom's health isn't great. I've been looking at places upstate, quieter, safer, better schools, room for Lily to run around. Dominic's heart rate picked up. When? I don't know. Soon, maybe, before she starts kindergarten. I want her to have a real childhood, not just growing up in a cramped apartment in a city that's too big and too dangerous. If you go, I go, Dominic said immediately. Elena looked at him. You'd really leave New York? The only place you've ever lived? I told you I'd go wherever you needed to feel safe raising Lily. I meant it. But the EMT program, there are EMT programs everywhere. There are hospitals everywhere. I can build a life anywhere as long as it includes seeing my daughter. Something in Elena's expression wavered. You say that now, but what if 6 months from now you miss the city, miss the life you had, miss the power and the respect and the importance of it all? Elena, I spent 15 years chasing power, and you know what I learned? Power doesn't call you at 3 in the morning because it had a nightmare. Power doesn't hold your hand in the park or hug your legs before running off to pet a dog. Power doesn't matter worth a damn in the moments that actually count. That's easy to say when you've only been living this life for 2 weeks. Then let me prove it over 2 months, or 6 months, or however long it takes. I'm not going anywhere, Elena. Not unless you and Lily go first, and then I'm following. Lily came bounding back before Elena could respond, chattering about how soft Buddy's ears were and how she'd decided she wanted a golden retriever specifically, not just any dog. They walked back to the pond together, and Dominic felt the subtle shift in how Elena positioned herself. Less defensive, less ready to run. Still cautious, but maybe, just maybe, starting to hope. The moment didn't last. They were almost to the park entrance when Dominic saw the black SUV parked on the street. Saw the man leaning against it, arms crossed, watching them with the particular stillness that came from professional patience. Vincent Marcuso. Dominic's entire body went rigid. Elena felt the change immediately. What's wrong? She asked. Nothing, just take Lily home. I'll call you later. Dominic, what? Elena followed his gaze and saw Vincent. Her face went pale. I thought you were out. You said you were done with all of that. I am. This is probably just what? A friendly visit? From a man who looks like he walked out of a crime movie? Elena's voice was rising, pulling Lily's attention. Mommy, what's wrong? Nothing, baby. We're going home now. Elena scooped Lily up, her eyes locked on Dominic with betrayal and fury and fear. Don't call me. Don't come to the park next Saturday. Don't contact us at all until you figure out whether you're really done with your old life, or if you've just been lying to both of us. Elena, wait! But she was already walking away, Lily looking confused over her shoulder, and Dominic was left standing on the sidewalk watching his second chance slip away before it had really begun. He turned to Vincent, anger replacing the panic. What the hell are you doing here? Vincent pushed off the SUV, his expression unreadable. We need to talk. We have nothing to talk about. I'm out. That was the deal. The deal was you leave New York. Last I checked, you're still here. I have 2 weeks before the program starts. I'm tying up loose ends. That your daughter? Vincent nodded toward Elena's retreating form. Every protective instinct Dominic had screamed at him not to answer that question. That's none of your business. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But here's the thing, Dominic. You left a lot of people very nervous when you walked away. We agreed to let you go because you convinced us you had enough dirt to bury us all if we didn't. But dirt only matters if you're alive to release it. Dominic's blood went cold. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality. You think you can just walk away from 15 years and start fresh? People don't forget. And some people don't forgive. You made a lot of enemies building your empire. Some of them might decide that retirement doesn't protect you. I have insurance policies. You know that. Insurance policies are complicated. They require you to be alive and functional to execute them. Accidents happen, Dominic. People get sick. They get in car crashes. They disappear. And if you're not around to trigger your fail-safes, well, all that dirt stays buried along with you. Dominic stepped closer, keeping his voice low and dangerous. If you're here to intimidate me, you've wasted your time. I'm not coming back. And if anything happens to me or my family, you won't just face federal prosecution. You'll face something worse. Every piece of information I have goes to every rival you've ever made. You'll have wars on all fronts. You want to risk that to make a point? Vincent studied him for a long moment. You've changed. The old Dominic would have already been calculating how to use this conversation to his advantage. You're not even thinking about leverage anymore. You really are trying to go straight. I told you I was. Yeah, well, some of our associates didn't believe you. They wanted me to check, see if you were setting something up, planning some kind of play we hadn't anticipated. Vincent smiled without warmth. I'll tell them you're genuine, that you really have gone soft for a woman and a kid. I'm not soft, I'm just done. Sure you are. Vincent opened the SUV door. One piece of advice from someone who's known you a long time: get out of New York, not in 2 weeks. Now, today. Because the longer you stay, the more people are going to wonder what you're up to. And wondering leads to paranoia. And paranoia leads to the kind of preemptive action you really don't want. Is that a threat or a warning? Both. Take care of yourself, Dominic, and watch your back. Not everyone is as understanding as I am. Vincent drove away, leaving Dominic standing on the sidewalk with the ruins of his second chance and the terrifying realization that leaving the life might not be enough to keep his family safe. He pulled out his phone and called Sarah Chen. I need to accelerate my timeline, he said when she answered. How fast can we formalize custody arrangements? Mr. Calderon, what's happened? I need legal protection for Elena and Lily. Documentation that establishes me as Lily's father and gives me legal standing to protect them. How fast can you make that happen? Sarah was quiet for a moment. I can file paternity papers immediately, but establishing custody rights takes time. Why the sudden urgency? Because I'm running out of it. I need those papers filed today. Whatever it costs, whatever you need from me, just make it happen. I'll need Elena's cooperation. I'll handle Elena. Just have the papers ready. He ended the call and immediately dialed Elena's number. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. She'd blocked him. Dominic stood in the cold January air, watching the park where he'd just spent the morning pretending to be a normal father, and realized how stupid he'd been to think escaping his past would be this simple. Vincent was right. The Empire didn't just let people go, and every day Dominic stayed in New York was another day his past could reach out and hurt the two people who mattered more than anything else. He had to leave, had to get Elena to understand that running wasn't about him being pulled back into the life. It was about protecting them from the consequences of the life he'd already lived. But first, he had to get her to answer his calls. And then he had to figure out how to prove he could keep them safe from enemies she didn't even know existed. Dominic spent the next 3 hours trying every way he could think of to reach Elena. Calls went to voicemail. Text messages showed as delivered but unread. He even tried emailing her, something they'd never done in all the years they'd known each other, and got nothing back. By 4 in the afternoon, he was standing outside Sarah Chen's office with documents that legally established him as Lily's biological father, papers that meant absolutely nothing if Elena wouldn't talk to him. She has every right to be angry, Sarah said, reviewing the paternity filing. You told her you were out of that life, and then someone from that life showed up while you were with your daughter. From her perspective, you lied. I didn't lie. Vincent came to me. I didn't invite him, didn't expect him, didn't want him there. But he knew where to find you. He knew about Lily. That suggests you're not as disconnected as you claim to be. Dominic's jaw tightened. The only reason he knew where to find me is because he's having me followed. They don't trust that I'm really out. They want to make sure I'm not setting them up. Are you? No, I told you, I'm done with all of it. But being done doesn't mean they're done with me. Sarah leaned back in her chair. Then you have a problem. Because Elena's primary concern has always been Lily's safety. If your past is still following you around, showing up at parks and implicitly threatening you, then from Elena's perspective, being around you puts Lily in danger. Which is exactly why I need legal standing to protect them both. If I'm Lily's legal father, I can provide security, move them somewhere safe, make sure you can't force protection on someone who doesn't want it. And right now, Elena doesn't want anything from you except distance. The words hit harder than they should have. Dominic stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city that had been his entire world for so long, and now felt like a cage closing in around him. How do I fix this? He asked quietly. You don't. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow. You give Elena space to process what happened. You respect her boundaries. And you hope that eventually she'll be willing to hear your side of the story. I don't have time for eventually. If Vincent knows about Lily, others might too. If they think they can use her to get to me, then you need to make it very clear to those people that touching your family means war. But you do that through legal channels now. through protective orders and documentation, and making sure Elena understands the real risks so she can make informed decisions. Dominic turned back to face her. Can you get a message to her? Tell her I need to explain what happened. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking for. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I'll try, but Dominic, if she says no, you need to respect that. Pushing harder will only make things worse. He left her office with a hollow feeling in his chest that reminded him too much of the night Elena had left him 3 years ago. The same sense of something precious slipping through his fingers while he stood helpless to stop it. His phone rang. Marco. Dom, we need to talk. Not now, Marco. Yes, now. I just got word that some of the younger guys are asking questions about your exit. Specifically, they're asking why we let you go so easily, why we didn't make an example. Dominic's blood went cold. Who's asking? Tony Russo's nephew, a couple of Vincent's crew. Nobody important yet, but you know how this works. Questions lead to doubts. Doubts lead to people wanting to prove themselves by going after perceived weakness. I'm not a perceived weakness. I'm a nuclear bomb with a dead man's switch. Anyone who comes after me gets everyone buried. They're kids, Dom, early 20s. They don't remember when you built your reputation. They just see you walking away and think it makes you soft. Makes all of us soft for letting you. Dominic closed his eyes. What do you need me to do? Get out of New York, tonight. The longer you stay, the more you become a target for some idiot kid trying to make his bones by taking down Dominic Calderone. I can't leave yet. I have things I need to... I don't care what you need to do. Pack a bag and go. I'll handle things here, but you need to disappear before someone does something stupid that we all end up paying for. The call ended. Dominic stood on the street corner feeling the walls closing in from every direction. Elena wouldn't talk to him. His old life was becoming dangerous in ways he'd underestimated. And somewhere in this city, his 3-year-old daughter was going about her day completely unaware that her father's past might be reaching toward her future. He made a decision. 20 minutes later, he was parked across the street from Elena's apartment building in Brooklyn. The neighborhood was nicer than he'd expected. Tree-lined streets, brownstones with well-maintained stoops, the kind of place where families felt safe raising children. He could see why Elena had chosen it. He waited. 6 o'clock came and went. The street grew darker, lit by street lamps that gave the snow a soft glow. Dominic watched the building entrance, hoping and dreading in equal measure. At 6:30, Elena appeared with Lily, both of them bundled against the cold. They were coming back from somewhere, Lily carrying what looked like a library book and chattering about something that made Elena smile despite whatever emotional turmoil she was dealing with. Dominic got out of the car. Elena saw him immediately. Her entire body language changed. Protective, defensive, furious. Lily, go inside and wait in the lobby, she said, her voice tight. I'll be right there. But Mommy, now, please. Something in Elena's tone made Lily obey without further argument. She went through the building entrance, looking back once with confused concern before the door closed behind her. Elena crossed the street toward Dominic, and the anger radiating from her was palpable. I told you not to contact me, she said, her voice low and dangerous. I told you to stay away until you figured out whether you were really done with your past. I am done with it. But it's not done with me, and that's what I need you to understand. I understand perfectly. You promised me you were out. You promised me it was safe. And then one of your associates shows up at the park while you're with our daughter. Do you have any idea how terrified I was? How quickly I remembered every reason I left you in the first place. Vincent was there to check on me, to make sure I wasn't planning something. I didn't invite him, Elena. I didn't want him there. But the reality is that walking away from that life doesn't mean everyone immediately forgets who I was. Then you're not really out, are you? If they're still watching you, still checking on you, still showing up in your life, then you're still connected to all of it. Not by choice. Does it matter? Elena's voice cracked. Choice or not, the danger is still there, and I will not let my daughter be anywhere near that danger. I won't do it, Dominic. Not for you, not for anyone. Which is exactly why I'm here. I need to get you and Lily somewhere safe, away from New York, away from anyone who might think they can use you to get to me. Elena laughed bitterly. You want us to run? To uproot our entire lives because you made enemies you can't control? I want you alive. I want Lily safe. Everything else is negotiable. We are safe. Here, in our apartment, living our normal lives. The only thing that makes us unsafe is you being part of those lives." The words were designed to hurt, and they succeeded. Dominic took a step back like he'd been physically struck. "You're right," he said quietly. "You're absolutely right. Being around me puts you both in danger. But Elena, the danger exists whether I'm around or not. These people know about you now. They know about Lily. If they decide to use that information, me staying away won't protect you. It'll just mean I'm not there to help when something happens. Nothing is going to happen. You're being paranoid. Am I? 3 years ago, I was paranoid about you being followed, about people watching the penthouse, about phones being tapped. You told me I was overreacting, that I was letting the business make me see threats that didn't exist. Do you remember what I said?" Elena's face was pale. "You said that in your world, paranoia was the only thing that kept people alive. And I was right. The threats were real. The danger was real. The only reason nothing ever happened to you was because I was careful, because I anticipated the worst and planned for it. I'm telling you right now, the threat is real, and I can't protect you if you won't let me near you. Then hire security, pay for bodyguards, do whatever you need to do from a distance. But I'm not letting you back into our lives just because you're scared of what your old enemies might do. This isn't about me getting back into your life. This is about keeping you and Lily alive. You're being dramatic. I'm being realistic, and I'm begging you to take this seriously before it's too late." Elena wrapped her arms around herself. "I need time to think, to process all of this, to figure out what's real concern and what's you trying to manipulate your way back into relevance." "I'm not trying to manipulate you." "Aren't you? Because from where I'm standing, this feels very convenient. You say you're out, but your past keeps showing up. You say you want to protect us, but the only threat we face is because of you. You say you've changed, but you're still thinking like a criminal, seeing danger everywhere, assuming the worst, trying to control situations through fear." The accusation stung because there was truth in it. Dominic was thinking like someone from his old life, anticipating threats, planning contingencies, operating from a place of controlled paranoia that had kept him alive for 15 years but had destroyed his marriage in the process. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, and for the first time in the conversation, his voice held genuine defeat. "Tell me what you need, Elena. Tell me how to fix this. I need you to prove that you can live a normal life, that you can exist in the world without turning everything into a crisis, that you can trust in something other than worst-case scenarios and protective measures. And if the threats are real, if I'm right and something happens because I listened to you instead of my instincts, then we deal with it, like normal people, by calling the police, by following legal channels, by not assuming we need a former mafia boss to protect us from other mafia bosses. The police can't protect you from these people." And there it is. Lena's voice was sad now, the anger burning out into something worse, resignation. "You can leave the business, but you can't leave the mindset. You still think you're the only one who can handle problems. Still think regular systems and normal solutions don't apply to you. Still think the world operates by the rules you learned in that life. Because it does. At least the part of the world I came from. But that's not my world anymore, Dominic. It's not Lily's world. It's not the world I want us to live in. And if you can't accept that, if you can't trust that we can be safe without you orchestrating everything, then you're not really ready to be part of our lives." She started to turn away, and Dominic felt panic rising in his chest. "Elena, wait, please. Just at least let me make sure you're safe. Let me set up some basic security. Cameras. Better locks. Something." Elena looked back at him, and her expression was a complicated mix of frustration and sympathy and exhausted patience. "You can set up security if it makes you feel better, but you're doing it through a legitimate company, with receipts and invoices and everything documented, and you're not using it as an excuse to be around us. Are we clear?" "Crystal." "Good. Now go home, Dominic. I need to get Lily to bed, and you need to figure out how to live with the consequences of your choices." She walked back across the street, disappearing into her building without looking back. Dominic stood by his car, the cold seeping through his jacket, and wondered how he had managed to lose the same woman twice for essentially the same reasons. His phone buzzed. Sarah Chen. "I spoke with Elena. She's agreed to meet with you on Monday. 2 p.m., my office. She wants to discuss formal custody arrangements and security concerns. She just told me she didn't want to see me. She doesn't want you showing up at her home or following her around, but she's willing to talk in a controlled professional setting. That's progress, Mr. Calderon. Take it. Dominic ended the call and got in his car. As he pulled away from Elena's street, he noticed a dark sedan parked 3 cars back. It pulled out when he did, maintaining distance but definitely following. He took a random turn. The sedan followed. Another turn. Still there. Someone was watching him. Whether it was Vincent's people making sure he was really leaving or someone else with different intentions, Dominic couldn't tell. But the message was clear. His past wasn't just following him metaphorically. It was literally tailing him through the streets of New York. He led them in circles for 20 minutes, finally losing them in midtown traffic. By the time he got back to his apartment in Queens, Dominic was exhausted and frustrated and more certain than ever that Elena was wrong. Normal solutions didn't work for abnormal problems. And the problem of men like Vincent Marcuso and Tony Russo and all the others he'd spent 15 years navigating wasn't something that got solved with police reports and legal channels. But Elena didn't want to hear that. She wanted to believe in a world where her past with Dominic didn't define her future, where Lily could grow up safe and normal without the shadow of her father's choices hanging over her. Dominic wanted that too, desperately. But wanting it didn't make it possible. He spent the weekend making arrangements. A security company, legitimate, licensed, with references Elena could check, to install cameras and upgrade locks at her apartment. He paid extra to have it done on Sunday, so Elena wouldn't have to take time off work. He made sure every receipt was documented, every payment traceable, everything above board and professional. He also made less legitimate arrangements. A friend of Marco's who specialized in counter-surveillance to do a sweep of Elena's building and the surrounding area. Another contact to run background checks on everyone who lived in her building, everyone who worked at Lily's daycare, everyone who might have access to his daughter's daily routine. These arrangements he didn't tell Elena about, because she'd see them as proof that he couldn't let go, couldn't trust normal systems, couldn't be the man she needed him to be. But Dominic would rather have Elena angry at him and alive than trusting him and dead. Monday afternoon, he sat across from Elena in Sarah Chen's office for the second time. The dynamic had shifted since their first meeting. There was less open hostility, but also less hope. Elena looked tired, like the weekend had been as difficult for her as it had been for him. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Dominic said. Elena nodded, but didn't smile. "Sarah said you wanted to discuss custody and security." "I do. I've arranged for professional security installation at your apartment. It's already done. Sarah can verify the company is legitimate. Cameras, upgraded locks, a monitored alarm system. You can cancel it any time, but at least it's there." I saw. The installation team came yesterday. They were very professional. Good. I also want to formalize my relationship with Lily. Legally establish paternity, create a custody agreement that gives us both clear rights and responsibilities. Sarah slid documents across the table. These are standard custody agreements. They establish Dominic as Lily's legal father and create a framework for shared custody. Currently, Elena has full physical custody. We're proposing supervised visitation for Dominic, escalating to unsupervised visits based on demonstrated consistency and Elena's comfort level. Elena read through the documents carefully. "What about child support?" "I'll pay whatever is fair," Dominic said. "More than fair. I want Lily to have everything she needs." "I don't want your money, Dominic. I never have." "This isn't about what you want. It's about what Lily deserves. Let me contribute to her life. Let me be responsible for her in every way I can be." Elena was quiet for a long moment. "If we do this, if we formalize everything, you need to understand that this isn't a stepping stone to getting me back. This isn't about us reconciling. This is purely about you being Lily's father." "I understand." "Do you?" "Because I need to be very clear. We're not a family, Dominic. We're 2 parents co-parenting a child, that's all. Whatever we had 3 years ago is gone." The words hurt more than Dominic wanted to admit, but he kept his expression neutral. "I'm not asking for us to get back together. I'm asking for a chance to be Lily's father. That's all." Elena looked at him like she was trying to see through him, trying to determine if he was telling the truth or just saying what she wanted to hear. Finally, she picked up the pen Sarah offered. When do we tell her? Elena asked. About who you are. Whenever you think she's ready. She's 3 years old. She's not going to understand the complexity of this situation. Then we keep it simple. I'm her dad. I haven't been around because grown-up reasons she doesn't need to understand yet. But I'm here now, and I want to be part of her life. Kids that age don't need the full story. They just need to know they're loved. Elena's eyes were bright with unshed tears. She's going to ask questions. Where have you been? Why didn't you visit before? Why does she see her friends' dads every day but only sees you sometimes? And we'll answer those questions honestly, in age-appropriate ways when they come up. But Elena, we can't let fear of difficult conversations keep us from doing what's right. Lily deserves to know her father, and I deserve the chance to be that for her. Sarah cleared her throat gently. If I may suggest, perhaps we start with having Dominic more present in Lily's life before explicitly telling her he's her father. Let her get comfortable with him, build trust, create positive associations. Then when you do tell her, it's not introducing a stranger as her dad. It's giving a name to a relationship that already exists. Elena considered this. That makes sense. How would that work practically? More frequent visits, not just parks on Saturdays. Maybe he picks her up from daycare sometimes, joins you for dinner occasionally, becomes a regular, reliable presence. Then in a few weeks or months, when it feels natural, you sit down together and explain who he is. I work during the day, Elena said. I can't supervise visits on weekdays. I can adjust my schedule, Dominic offered. The EMT program doesn't start for another week. Until then, I'm free. And after it starts? Classes are evenings and weekends. I'll make whatever schedule works for you. Elena looked down at the papers again. This feels like I'm signing away control. Like I'm agreeing to let you into our lives when I'm still not sure that's safe. You're not signing away anything except sole custody. You still have primary physical custody. You still make all major decisions about Lily's upbringing. All this does is give me legal standing to be her father and gives her legal claim to my support and protection. Protection from what? From threats that exist because of you? That's circular logic, Dominic. Protection from anything. Life is unpredictable. If something happens to you, don't you want Lily to have a parent who can step in? Don't you want her to have someone who loves her and can take care of her? Elena's hand trembled slightly as she signed the first page. My mother is getting older, less capable of helping with Lily, and I don't have anyone else. No siblings, no partner. If something happened to me, Lily would go into foster care or to distant relatives who don't know her. Not anymore. Sign these papers, and she has a father who will move heaven and earth to take care of her. Elena signed the rest of the documents quickly, like she was afraid she'd change her mind if she slowed down. When she finished, she looked up at Dominic with an expression he couldn't quite read. Don't make me regret this, she said quietly. I won't. I promise you, Elena, I won't. Sarah collected the documents, making copies for everyone. I'll file these with the court this week. Barring any objections, which there won't be since both parties agree, the custody arrangement will be official within 30 days. What about telling Lily? Elena asked. That's up to you, Sarah said. There's no legal requirement to tell her immediately. You can take whatever time you need. Elena stood, gathering her things. Can you pick her up from daycare on Wednesday? 3 o'clock. I'll text you the address. Dominic felt something like hope flutter in his chest. Really? You said you wanted to be present. Prove it. Pick her up, take her to the park for an hour. Bring her home by 5. I'll be there when you drop her off. I'll be there. 3 o'clock. I won't be late. Elena nodded and left without another word. Sarah smiled at Dominic once they were alone. That went better than expected, she said. Did it? She's giving you a chance. That's more than most people get after the kind of betrayals you're recovering from. Don't waste it. Dominic looked at the signed custody agreement, his name next to Elena's, both of them claiming Lily as their daughter. It was just paper, just legal formalities, but it felt like the first real step toward building something that could last. He spent the next 2 days preparing for Wednesday like he used to prepare for major deals. He researched the daycare, memorized the route, identified potential problems and solutions. He bought a car seat and had it professionally installed. He called the daycare to introduce himself and make sure Elena had added him to the approved pickup list. When Wednesday arrived, Dominic was outside the daycare at 2:45, waiting in a car that had been scrubbed clean and checked 3 times to make sure it was safe for a child. At exactly 3 o'clock, the daycare doors opened and children began streaming out to waiting parents. Dominic approached the teacher, showed his ID, and waited as she went inside to get Lily. When Lily emerged, her face lit up with surprised delight. "Dom, what are you doing here?" "Your mom asked me to pick you up today. Is that okay?" "Yeah, are we going to the park?" "If you want to." "I want to! Let's go!" She grabbed his hand with unconscious trust, chattering about her day as they walked to the car. Dominic helped her into the car seat, checking the straps 3 times to make sure they were secure. "You're being very careful," Lily observed. "My mom checks that many times too. I want to make sure you're safe." Mom says being careful is how we show people we love them. The simple statement hit Dominic harder than it should have. "Your mom is very smart." They drove to the park in comfortable silence, Lily kicking her feet and humming to herself. At the park, she ran immediately to the swings, demanding Dominic push her higher, higher. He obliged, watching her hair fly behind her and listening to her shriek with laughter, and felt something settle in his chest that had been restless for 3 years. This was what mattered, this pure, uncomplicated joy, this trust, this moment of a child simply being happy that someone who cared about her was paying attention. They fed the ducks. They built a snowman that was mostly just a pile of snow with sticks for arms. They chased pigeons until Lily was breathless with laughter. At 4:30, Dominic said they needed to start heading back so he could get her home by 5. Lily pouted, but accepted it with the resilience of childhood. On the drive back, she asked the question he'd been waiting for. "Dom, why do you only visit sometimes? My friend Sarah's dad lives with her. He's there every day." Dominic glanced at her in the rearview mirror, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups can't live together, even when they care about each other. But that doesn't mean they don't care. Your mom and I both care about you very much. "Is that why you and Mommy don't live together?" "Yes. But you still like me?" "I more than like you, Lily. I love you." It was the first time he'd said it out loud. The words felt both enormous and insufficient for what he actually felt. "I love you too, Dom," Lily said with the easy affection of someone who hadn't learned to guard her heart yet. Dominic had to blink hard to keep his vision clear for the rest of the drive. Elena was waiting outside her building when they arrived at 5 o'clock exactly. Lily bounded out of the car, already telling her mother about the snowman and the ducks, and how high she went on the swings. Elena listened with patient attention, then looked at Dominic over Lily's head. "Thank you for bringing her home on time." "Always." "Same time Friday?" Elena hesitated, then nodded. "Same time Friday." It wasn't much. It wasn't the family Dominic had imagined when he first saw Lily on Christmas Eve. But it was progress. It was trust, slowly rebuilding. It was a chance to prove that he could be consistent, reliable, present. As he drove away, Dominic's phone rang. Marco. "We have a problem," Marco said without preamble. "Tony Russo's nephew made a move, tried to take over one of your old territories, used your exit as proof that we're weak. Handle it." "I am handling it. But Dom, it's getting messy. The kind of messy that might splash back on you even though you're out." Dominic's chest tightened. "What do you need me to do?" "Nothing. Stay out. Let me fix this. I just wanted you to know in case things escalate." "Will they?" "Probably. The nephew's an idiot, but he's connected. Taking him out means going through Tony, and that means potential war. But I'll do what I can to keep your name out of it." The call ended. Dominic sat in his car, parked on a quiet street in Queens, and felt the weight of his old life pressing down on his new one. Everything he'd built over the past 3 weeks, the trust with Elena, the relationship with Lily, the hope for something better, all of it was fragile. And somewhere in New York, dangerous men were making moves that could shatter that fragility without even meaning to. He thought about Elena's words, about trusting normal solutions and living like regular people and not seeing threats in every shadow. But the threats were real, and pretending they weren't wouldn't make them disappear. Dominic started the engine and drove toward his apartment, already planning contingencies he hoped he'd never need, watching his mirrors for cars that might be following, living in the space between the life he'd left and the life he was trying to build, and wondering if it was possible to escape your past when your past refused to let you go. The situation Marco had warned about exploded exactly 3 days later. Dominic was at his apartment reviewing materials for the EMT program that started the following week when his phone rang at 11 p.m. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Dominic Calderon. A voice he didn't recognize. Young, nervous, trying too hard to sound threatening. Who's asking? This is a courtesy call. You got out of the business. We respect that. But your boy Marco, he's causing problems. Problems that trace back to you. We think maybe you need to come explain to him that starting wars over territory that's not even yours anymore isn't smart. Dominic's entire body went cold. Who is this? Doesn't matter. What matters is that Marco hit one of our crews tonight, put 2 guys in the hospital, said it was because we were operating in your old territory. But see, it's not your territory anymore. You gave it up, and we don't appreciate him using your name to justify violence. Put Tony on the phone. Tony's busy. I'm handling this. Which meant this was the nephew, the idiot Marco had mentioned. And if the nephew was calling Dominic directly, the situation was worse than Marco had let on. Listen very carefully, Dominic said, his voice taking on the cold authority that used to make men twice his age nervous. Whatever beef you have with Marco, you handle through proper channels. You don't call me, you don't use my name, and you definitely don't threaten me with consequences for shit I'm not part of anymore. Or what? You're out, remember? You got no power, no crew, no territory. You're just some regular guy now, so maybe you should tell Marco to back off before regular guys like you get caught in crossfire meant for someone else. The implied threat was clear. The nephew was stupid enough to think going after Dominic directly would send a message to Marco and the others, would prove that the old guard's protection didn't mean anything anymore. You have no idea what you're starting, Dominic said quietly. I know exactly what I'm starting. A new era, where young guys with ambition don't have to bow to has-beens who think they still matter. The call ended. Dominic immediately dialed Marco. Tell me you didn't actually put Tony's nephew's guys in the hospital. Marco's sigh told him everything. They were moving product in your old territory, testing boundaries. I sent a message. By hospitalizing people? Marco, I'm trying to build a life here. A normal life. I can't do that if there's an active war happening with my name attached to it. Your name stopped being relevant the moment you signed those exit papers. This is about my territory now, my reputation. You don't get to tell me how to handle my business. Except it's not just your business when some punk kid is calling me at 11 at night making threats. There was a pause. The nephew called you? Just now. Told me I need to explain to you that starting wars is bad for my health. Reading between the lines, he's threatening to come after me to make a point about the new generation not being afraid of the old guard. Marco swore. That idiot. Tony's going to kill him himself when he finds out. Unless the idiot makes a move first. Marco, I need you to shut this down. Whatever it takes. Because if something happens to me, if anything touches my family, the insurance policies I told everyone about, they go active and everyone burns. I'll handle it. How? By putting more guys in the hospital? By escalating until Tony has no choice but to respond? This ends one way, Marco, and you know it. Then what do you want me to do? Let them walk all over me? Let them think your exit means we're all weak? I want you to be smart. Use diplomacy before violence. Talk to Tony directly. Explain that his nephew is a liability who's going to start a war nobody wants. Get Tony to rein him in before this gets worse. And if Tony won't listen? Dominic closed his eyes. Then you do what you have to do, but you keep my name out of it. You make it clear this is about current business, not old grudges, and you make damn sure nothing splashes back on Elena or Lily. I'll do my best. Your best isn't good enough. I need guarantees, Marco. I can't guarantee anything in this business. You know that better than anyone. The truth of it hit Dominic like a weight. This was exactly what Elena had been afraid of, exactly what she'd warned him about. The past wasn't just following him. It was actively threatening the future he was trying to build. He called Sarah Chen next, despite the late hour. I need to move them, he said when she answered. Elena and Lily. Somewhere safe. Somewhere far from New York. Tomorrow. What happened? He explained about the call, about Marco's retaliation, about the very real possibility that someone young and stupid might decide targeting Dominic's family was a good way to make a reputation. I can't force Elena to leave, Sarah said. She has to agree voluntarily. Then help me convince her, please. This isn't paranoia. This isn't me overreacting. This is a credible threat from someone who doesn't understand consequences. I'll call her first thing in the morning. But Dominic, if she says no, you need to respect that. Even if saying no gets her killed, even then, she's an adult. She gets to make her own choices about risk. Dominic didn't sleep that night. He sat at his window, watching the street below for cars that didn't belong, for movement that seemed wrong, for any sign that the nephew was stupid enough to make a move immediately. At 6 a.m., he called Elena directly. She answered on the third ring, her voice thick with sleep. Dominic, it's 6 in the morning. What's wrong? I need you to pack bags for you and Lily. Enough for a week. I'm coming to pick you up at 9. What? No, I have work. Lily has daycare. What are you talking about? There's been a situation. People from my old life are making threats. I need to get you both somewhere safe until it's resolved. He heard her sit up, heard the rustle of sheets, and the sharp intake of breath. What kind of threats? The kind that means you and Lily need to not be in New York for a few days. Please, Elena. I know you don't want to disrupt your life. I know you think I'm overreacting, but I'm begging you, trust me on this one. How bad is it really? Dominic could have lied, could have minimized the threat to make it more palatable, but Elena deserved the truth. Bad enough that I spent all night watching the street to make sure nobody was coming. Bad enough that Marco thinks there might be violence. Bad enough that I'm genuinely afraid something could happen to you or Lily if you stay here. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Where would we go? I have a place upstate, a cabin my father bought decades ago. Nobody knows about it. It's not in my name, not connected to any of my business dealings. We can stay there until Marco resolves the situation. I'm coming with you. I'm not leaving you and Lily alone when there are active threats. For how long? A week, maybe less if things calm down faster than expected. I can't just disappear for a week, Dominic. I have responsibilities, a job, a life. I understand, but what good is any of that if you're dead? The blunt statement hung in the air. Dominic could hear Elena breathing, could almost hear her thinking through the implications. I'll call Sarah, she finally said. If she thinks this is legitimate, I'll consider it. Thank you. An hour later, Sarah called him back. I spoke with Elena. She's agreed to go, but on conditions. You stay in a separate room. No attempts to use this situation to rebuild your relationship. And the moment she feels unsafe or uncomfortable, she can leave and you don't try to stop her. Agreed. All of it. Whatever she needs. Good. She'll be ready by 9. Don't be late. Dominic spent the next 2 hours packing, checking the cabin's location on maps, and making sure the route was secure. He called Marco one more time. I'm taking them out of the city. Don't tell anyone where we are. Not Vincent, not Tony, nobody. You don't trust me. I trust you. I don't trust everyone around you. The fewer people who know, the safer they are. Fair enough. I'll handle things here. Should be resolved in a few days. It better be. At exactly 9 o'clock, Dominic pulled up in front of Elena's building. She was waiting outside with Lily and 2 suitcases, her face tight with stress and poorly concealed fear. Mommy said we're going on an adventure, Lily announced cheerfully, completely oblivious to the tension. Are we really going to a cabin in the woods? We really are, Dominic said, loading their bags into the trunk. Have you ever been to a cabin before? No. Will there be animals? Can we see deer? Maybe. We'll have to be very quiet and patient. The drive upstate took 3 hours. Dominic kept checking his mirrors, watching for tails, making random turns to ensure nobody was following. Elena noticed. Are we being followed? She asked quietly, while Lily dozed in the back seat. No, I'm just being careful. This is what I was afraid of. This is why I left 3 years ago. Because your life means never feeling safe, never knowing if today is the day something terrible happens. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry you're going through this. I'm sorry Lily's involved. I'm sorry I brought this danger into your lives. But Elena, I'm going to fix this permanently. How? However I have to. They arrived at the cabin just after noon. It was smaller than Elena had probably imagined. 2 bedrooms, a main room with a fireplace, a kitchen that was functional but basic. But it was isolated, surrounded by snow-covered woods, and most importantly, safe. Lily was enchanted, running from window to window looking for animals, exploring the bedrooms, declaring that this was the best adventure ever. Elena was less enthusiastic. She set her bag in the smaller bedroom and turned to Dominic with tired eyes. How long are we really going to be here? As long as it takes for Marco to shut down the situation. Could be 3 days, could be a week. And you're sure we're safe here? As sure as I can be about anything. That night, after Lily was asleep, Dominic and Elena sat by the fireplace in uncomfortable silence. Finally, Elena spoke. Tell me the truth. Is this ever going to end, or are we going to spend the rest of our lives running from your past? It's going to end. I'm making sure of it. How can you possibly make that promise? Dominic pulled out his phone and showed her a document he'd been drafting. This is everything I know about everyone I used to work with. Every deal, every crime, every piece of leverage. I'm going to give it to federal prosecutors with immunity for myself in exchange for testimony. Elena stared at him. You're going to turn informant? I'm going to end this. Permanently. Put enough people away that the remainder won't dare come near me or mine. It's the only way to guarantee your safety. Dominic, they'll kill you for that. You know they will. Not if I do it right. Not if I make sure everyone understands that the information goes public anyway if something happens to me. It becomes the ultimate insurance policy. Touch me or my family, and everyone goes down. That's insane. That's suicide. That's the only option I have left. I tried walking away quietly. I tried negotiating my exit. I tried building a normal life. But as long as those men are free and operating, they're going to see me as either a threat or a target. So I removed them from the equation. Elena's hands were shaking. What if it doesn't work? What if they get to you before you can make the deal? Then the information goes public anyway, and Lily inherits everything I have left. Which isn't much, but it's something. And you and she will be free of my past permanently. I don't want your money, Dominic. I want you alive, for Lily's sake. She's just starting to know you. Don't take that away from her. I'm not planning to die. I'm planning to end this so I can actually be her father without looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. They sat in silence while the fire crackled. Outside, snow had started falling again, blanketing the woods in pristine white. When are you doing this? Elena finally asked. As soon as we get back to the city. I've already made contact with the right people. They're very interested in what I have to offer. Does Marco know? No, and he can't, because if he knows, he'll try to stop me, or warn the others. This only works if it's a complete surprise. Elena looked at him with an expression that was equal parts terror and resignation. This is the most reckless, dangerous, stupid thing you've ever done. Probably. But it's also the first time you've put Lily's future ahead of your own survival. She matters more than I do. You both do. Elena's eyes were bright with tears. Don't die, Dominic, please. Whatever happens, don't die. Because I don't want to have to explain to our daughter that her father sacrificed himself before she got the chance to really know him. I don't plan to. The next 3 days passed in strange domestic normalcy. Dominic taught Lily how to build a fire, how to identify bird tracks in the snow, how to be patient waiting for deer to appear at the edge of the clearing. Elena cooked meals in the small kitchen, read books by the fireplace, and slowly let her guard down enough to laugh occasionally. On the third night, after Lily was asleep, Elena found Dominic outside on the porch, watching the stars. Marco called, she said. He said it's handled. Tony dealt with his nephew personally. Apparently the kid is being sent to Florida to run a car wash and think about his life choices. That's good news. So we can go home? Tomorrow. I want to give it one more day to make sure there's no fallout. Elena sat beside him on the porch steps, pulling her coat tighter against the cold. She asked me today who you are, really are. She said you seem different than other grown-ups. More careful, more watchful. What did you tell her? That you're her father, that you haven't been around because of grown-up mistakes, but that you're here now and you want to be part of her life. Dominic's breath caught. How did she react? She asked if that meant you'd be around more, if you'd come to her birthday parties and read her bedtime stories and teach her things. What did you say? I said yes, that you would. And Dominic, you better not make me a liar. Because she's so happy right now, so excited to have a dad. And if you disappoint her, if you fail to show up, if you make promises you don't keep, it will break her heart in ways that matter. I won't. I swear to you, Elena, I won't. I want to believe you. I'm trying to believe you, but believing requires trust, and trust requires time. So prove it, not just for a week or a month, but for years, for her whole life. Be the father she deserves. I will be. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars that seemed closer out here in the woods, away from the city lights that had defined Dominic's entire adult life. I've been thinking, Elena said quietly, about what you said, about turning informant, about ending this permanently. And I think you should do it, not because I want you to risk your life, but because you're right. As long as those men are operating, we'll never be truly safe. Lily will never be truly safe. And I'd rather you take the risk now, while you still have leverage, than wait until it's too late. You understand what that means? I'll have to testify. Face them in court. They'll know it was me. But you'll be protected. Witness protection, immunity, all of it, right? That's the plan. Then do it. End this, so we can finally move forward without your past chasing us. The next morning, they drove back to the city. Lily chattered the entire way about the cabin and the deer they'd seen and how she wanted to go back again soon. Elena was quieter, lost in thought, occasionally meeting Dominic's eyes in the rearview mirror. When they pulled up to Elena's building, Dominic helped carry their bags inside. Lily threw her arms around his legs. "When will I see you again, Daddy?" It was the first time she'd called him that. Dominic had to swallow hard before he could answer. "Saturday. Same time as always. We'll go feed the ducks." "Promise?" "I promise, sweetheart." Elena walked him to the door. "Be careful, whatever you're planning to do. Be careful." "I will." "And Dominic, thank you for keeping us safe, for taking this seriously, for finally choosing us over everything else." He wanted to kiss her, wanted to pull her close and tell her that he'd never stopped loving her, that these past weeks had reminded him of everything he'd lost when she left. But he didn't, because she'd been clear. This wasn't about them reconciling. This was about being parents to their daughter. So he just nodded and left. 2 days later, Dominic sat in a federal building in Lower Manhattan, across from 2 FBI agents and a prosecutor. Spread across the table between them were documents detailing 15 years of criminal activity involving every major player in New York's organized crime networks. "This is extraordinary," the prosecutor said, flipping through pages. "If even half of this checks out, we can take down 3 entire families." "It all checks out. I was careful. I documented everything because I knew someday I might need insurance." "And you're willing to testify?" "Publicly?" "Yes. In exchange for full immunity and protection for my family." "We can do immunity. Protection is trickier. Witness protection means new identities, relocation, cutting ties with everyone you've ever known. I don't need witness protection for myself, just surveillance on my family, security, making sure nobody retaliates against them." The agents exchanged glances. "That's not standard procedure." "Make it standard, because if anything happens to my daughter or her mother, this deal is off and all this information goes public in the worst possible way for everyone involved." The prosecutor leaned back. "You're in no position to make demands." "Actually, I am, because you need this information more than I need immunity. I've already walked away from that life. I'm building something legitimate, but I can't do that if I'm constantly worried about retaliation. So you give me what I need, and I'll give you enough convictions to make your career." 3 hours later, the deal was signed. Dominic walked out of the federal building knowing he'd just guaranteed either his safety or his death, and there was no middle ground. Marco called him that evening. "I heard rumors. Tell me they're not true." "Depends on what you heard. That you made a deal with the feds, that you're turning informant." Dominic didn't answer immediately. "I did what I had to do to protect my family." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, "You know what this means, right? You know what happens to informants?" "I know what's supposed to happen, but I also know that everyone I'm informing on is going to be in federal custody by the end of the week. And anyone who comes after me gets added to the list." "Jesus, Dom, this is bigger than just protecting your family. This is war." "No, War is what happens when people keep fighting. This is the end of the war. I'm removing the combatants from the field. And you think the feds will actually protect you? They'll use you and discard you the moment you're no longer useful. Maybe. But at least Lily will grow up safe. That's all that matters now. Marco was quiet for a long moment. I can't protect you from this. You know that, right? Once this goes public, we're not friends anymore. I can't be associated with an informant. I know. I'm sorry, Marco. You've been a good friend, better than I deserved, but I'm choosing my daughter over everything else. I hope someday you understand. The call ended. Dominic sat in his apartment, looking at photos of Lily on his phone, pictures he'd taken at the cabin, her face bright with joy as she showed him a deer track in the snow. Everything he'd built over 15 years was about to come crashing down. Friendships would end. Reputation would be destroyed. He'd be known as the man who betrayed everyone he'd ever worked with. But Lily would be safe, Elena would be safe, and that trade was worth everything else. The arrest started 3 days later. Federal agents executed coordinated raids across New York, taking down key players in 3 major crime families. Vincent Marcuso was arrested at his home. Tony Russo and his nephew were both taken into custody. Michael Chen was picked up at the docks. One by one, everyone Dominic had ever done business with found themselves in handcuffs, facing decades in prison based on testimony and evidence provided by Dominic Calderone. The news coverage was intense. Dominic's name was everywhere. The former Mafia boss turned federal informant, the man who'd brought down an empire. His photo was on every news channel, his story dissected by everyone from legal experts to crime bloggers. Elena called him that evening, her voice tight with fear. Are you safe? Tell me you're safe. I'm fine. The feds have me in protective custody until the trials. Nobody can get to me. What about after? What about when the trials are over and you're just a regular person again? These people have long memories, Dominic. Most of them will be in prison for the next 20 to 30 years. The ones who aren't will know better than to come after me because the feds made it very clear. Any retaliation means reopening investigations into everyone else. It becomes mutually assured destruction. You're betting our lives on that logic? I'm betting our lives on the fact that I removed the most dangerous players from the board. The remaining ones are small time, and they're not going to risk everything for revenge. Elena was crying softly. I'm so scared. I'm terrified that this was a mistake, that you just painted a target on all of us. I painted a target on myself. But I also made sure that Target is surrounded by federal protection and legal consequences for anyone who aims at it. Elena, this was the only way, and I'd do it again without hesitation if it means Lily grows up safe. The trials took 6 months. Dominic testified in court after court, facing men he'd once called colleagues and friends. Their faces were full of hatred, but they couldn't touch him. The evidence was overwhelming. The testimony was damning. One by one, they were convicted and sent to federal prison. By the time the last trial ended, Dominic had helped put away 47 people. The New York organized crime landscape had been devastated, restructured, forced to rebuild from the ground up. And Dominic was free. He started the EMT program as planned, working twice as hard as everyone else to prove he belonged there. He moved to a better apartment, closer to Elena's building, but not so close that it felt invasive. He picked Lily up from daycare 3 times a week, took her to the park every Saturday, showed up for every birthday party and school event. Slowly, over months that turned into a year, Elena's walls came down. Not all at once, but gradually. She started inviting him to dinner occasionally, started trusting him to take Lily overnight, started looking at him like he was someone she could depend on rather than someone she needed to protect herself from. One Saturday in December, exactly 1 year after that first Christmas Eve encounter, Dominic arrived at the park to find Elena and Lily waiting with hot chocolate and a surprise. We wanted to show you something, Lily said, bouncing with excitement. She handed him a drawing, a child's crayon picture of 3 stick figures holding hands. That's you and Mommy and me. We're a family. Dominic looked at Elena, who smiled with an expression that held hope and possibility and the beginning of forgiveness. We are a family, Elena confirmed quietly. Maybe not a traditional one. Maybe still figuring out what that means. But we're trying. I'm trying too, Dominic said, every single day. Later that afternoon, after Lily had run off to feed the ducks, Elena and Dominic sat on their usual bench, watching their daughter laugh. "I've been thinking," Elena said carefully, "about the future, about what happens next." "What do you mean?" "I mean that you've proven yourself, Dominic. You've been consistent and reliable and present for a whole year. You've built a legitimate life. You've put Lily first in every decision. You've done everything you said you would do. That's what fathers are supposed to do." "Yes, but not every father actually does it. You have." Elena took a breath. "I'm not saying we get back together. I'm not saying we try to recapture what we had 3 years ago. That's gone, and we both need to accept that." "Okay. But I'm saying that maybe we could try something new, start fresh, date maybe. Like two people meeting for the first time instead of two people trying to resurrect a dead marriage." Dominic's heart was pounding. "You'd be willing to do that?" "I'd be willing to try, slowly, carefully, with Lily's best interests always coming first. No guarantees, no promises beyond taking it one day at a time." "That's more than I ever hoped for." Elena smiled, and it was genuine, reaching her eyes in a way Dominic hadn't seen since before everything fell apart. "Ask me properly." "Elena Moore, would you have dinner with me? Just the two of us. A real date where we pretend we're two normal people who happen to have a beautiful daughter together and are trying to figure out if there's still something between them worth exploring." "I'd love to." 6 months later, Dominic stood in a small house upstate. Not the cabin, but a real house with a yard and space for Lily to run and room for the golden retriever puppy that had been her 4th birthday present. Elena was in the kitchen, laughing at something Lily was saying about the dog trying to eat her homework. The sound drifted through the house like music. They'd moved out of New York 3 months ago, all three of them together. Dominic had found work at a local hospital as a paramedic. Elena had gotten a remote position that let her work from home. Lily had started preschool in a tiny town where the biggest crime was teenagers toilet papering yards on Halloween. It was ordinary, peaceful, everything Dominic had spent 15 years running from because he'd been too stupid to recognize it as everything that mattered. On Saturday afternoon, exactly 18 months after that first Christmas Eve, Dominic took Elena and Lily back to the park where they used to feed the ducks. It was different now, clearer, brighter, full of the kind of hope that comes from building something real instead of powerful. Lily ran ahead to the pond, the golden retriever puppy bounding along beside her. Elena slipped her hand into Dominic's, and he felt the weight of the ring in his pocket. A simple band, nothing like the ostentatious diamond he'd given her the first time. This one was modest, meaningful, a symbol of starting over rather than trying to recapture the past. "I need to ask you something," Dominic said, stopping by the same bench where they'd sat a year ago. Elena turned to him, and there was knowing in her eyes. "Ask me. I know we said we were taking things slow. I know we agreed not to rush. But Elena, this past year and a half has taught me something important. Every day I spend with you and Lily is a day that matters. And I don't want to waste any more days pretending we're just dating or just co-parenting or just figuring things out." He pulled out the ring. "We're building a life together, a real one. And I want to make it official. Not because I'm trying to recapture what we lost, but because I want to create something new, something better. Something built on truth and trust and showing up every single day." Elena's eyes were bright with tears. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" "Elena Moore, will you marry me? Again. For real this time. Not as the woman who tried to save a man who wasn't ready to be saved, but as the mother of my daughter and the person who gave me a second chance I didn't deserve and somehow loved me enough to let me prove I could change." "Yes," Elena whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Lily came running back, saw them embracing, and shrieked with joy. "Are you getting married? Are you really getting married?" "We really are," Elena confirmed, laughing through tears. "Does that mean we're a real family now?" Dominic crouched down, pulling Lily into the embrace. "We've been a real family for a while now, sweetheart. This just makes it official." They married quietly 2 months later, in a small ceremony attended by Elena's mother, a few close friends, and Lily as the world's most enthusiastic flower girl. No grand venue, no expensive reception, just a commitment made in front of people who mattered. Standing at the altar, watching Elena walk toward him with Lily holding her hand, Dominic thought about everything he'd given up to get here. The empire, the power, The reputation. The life that had seemed so important until he understood what it had cost him. And he wouldn't change a single thing about walking away from it. 1 year later, on another Christmas Eve, Dominic stood in their living room watching Lily decorate a tree with ornaments she'd made at school. Elena was beside him, her hand resting on her slightly rounded belly, 7 months pregnant with their second child, a boy they'd already decided to name after Dominic's father. "What are you thinking about?" Elena asked softly. "About how 2 years ago I was standing in an empty conference room looking at the city and feeling nothing. And now I'm here, watching our daughter hang ornaments on a tree in a house we own, about to have another child, married to a woman I don't deserve but somehow get to keep." "You deserve it," Elena said. "You earned it. By choosing us over everything else, by proving day after day that you meant it when you said you'd changed." Lily came running over. "Daddy, can you lift me up? I want to put the star on top." Dominic lifted his daughter, holding her steady while she carefully placed the star, her tongue sticking out in concentration. When she was satisfied, he set her down and she immediately ran to show her mother how good it looked. Outside, snow was starting to fall, covering their small town in the same white that had covered New York that first night. But this time, Dominic wasn't alone. This time he had everything that mattered. His phone rang. Marco. They talked occasionally now, carefully neutral conversations that acknowledged their shared history without dwelling on it. Marco had survived the prosecutions, had rebuilt in the power vacuum Dominic's testimony created, and bore no apparent grudge about how things had ended. "Merry Christmas, Dom." "Merry Christmas, Marco. How are you?" "Good. Business is good. Sophia's pregnant again, our fourth." "Congratulations." "You too. Heard you and Elena are expecting. A boy this time?" "Yeah, due in February." There was a pause. "You happy, Dom? Really happy?" Dominic looked at his wife and daughter, at the Christmas tree and the home they'd built together, at the life he'd created from the ruins of his empire. "Yeah, Marco. I really am." "Good. You deserve it. You made the right call getting out when you did. I see that now." The call ended. Dominic set his phone aside and joined his family by the tree, Lily immediately demanding he read her a story while Elena made hot chocolate. This was success. Not the kind measured in territory controlled or deals closed or respect commanded through fear. The kind measured in bedtime stories and hot chocolate and a daughter who felt safe enough to fall asleep in her father's arms. The kind of success that actually meant something. Later that night, after Lily was asleep and Elena had gone to bed, Dominic stood at the window looking out at the falling snow. He thought about the man he'd been 2 years ago, powerful, wealthy, empty, and he thought about the man he was now, ordinary, content, whole. It wasn't even close. The empire had been impressive, but this ordinary life full of ordinary moments with people he loved, this was everything. Dominic turned away from the window and went to join his wife, closing the door on his past and walking into a future that was finally, genuinely his own. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering everything in white that would stay pristine for a few hours before the world turned it to slush. But tonight, just for tonight, everything was clean and new and possible. And for the first time in 15 years, Dominic Calderone was exactly where he belonged.